¿Quién ya ha oído de Tan Lee? ¿Quién piensa que es magia? Obra negra. Bueno, o sea, ¿quién piensa que está basado en la ciencia? ¿Y los demás que no levantan la mano, qué están pensando entonces? ¿No? Bueno, los que ya leyeron, pues ya saben de qué se trata un poco. Tan Lee viene de Australia, luego se ha mudado a Estados Unidos para elaborar este proyecto de Emotiv. Es una diadema que permite leer las ondas cerebrales y los convierte en instrucciones para las computadoras y para otros dispositivos. De eso nos va a hablar en esta hora. Y por favor, una ronda de aplausos para Tan Lee.
Thank you. Can we switch to the presentation, please? Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming to this talk about the human brain, which I believe is the next frontier. I feel like a campus party veteran, so thank you very much to the organizers for having me back here at Campus Party Mexico. This is the first time at this event. I'm going to take you a little bit back a little bit about my history to begin with. So I was 4 years old when my mother took my younger sister and I on a life-defining boat journey. We left behind the country of our birth and we ventured out into the unknown in search of a better future. Now we left behind everything, our history, our roots, everything that was known and familiar, and we ventured into the unknown, not knowing where we were going or in fact even where we would end up. And my family actually were one of the lucky ones, because after 5 days and nights at sea, we were rescued by a British oil tanker just off the coast of Malaysia and taken into a refugee camp while we waited for a country that would take us in and give us a chance at a new life. Well, Australia was the country that opened her arms to us, and in December 1981, my family arrived in Melbourne. And I remember that moment actually very vividly, because my mother, as I was walking down, my sister and I walked us down the gangway from the aeroplane. She said to us, "At the bottom of the steps, you will touch onto very special ground, and you should bend down and touch the ground." So I remember bending down and touching the ground and looking up to my mother and saying, "Mom, it doesn't feel very special." And then my mother said, "Well, make it special in your minds." And that's how we approached our life from that moment onwards. We were open, grateful, and really ready to start a better life. Now, with any new immigrant story, as you would know, when you enter a new country, the process of starting to learn the new language becomes immediately. It comes immediately, and there's tremendous pressure on you to learn the new language. In fact, my grandmother, aunt, and uncle who had come out with us suggested that we quickly abandon our mother tongue in an attempt to fully embrace and master our new language, which was English. My mother wouldn't have any of it. She insisted that we could speak English at school, but from the moment we arrived home, we had to speak Vietnamese. Now, what great fortune that was, because we were exposed to both languages throughout our childhood. So by the time we grew up, we were fluent in both languages, and in fact were able to think and dream in both. Now, what my mother didn't know was that studies on the brain had shown that a child's brain actually goes through a critical period. Basically, a period of time in which the brain is especially sensitive and plastic. So it undergoes really rapid and formative growth during that time. And each neural system has its own critical period. Language development, as it turns out, has a critical period that begins at infancy and ends sometime between the ages of 8 and puberty. So after this critical period closes, a person's ability to learn a second language without an accent is considerably limited. In fact, second languages that are learned after the critical period closes are not even processed in the same part of the brain. It's actually processed in a different part and region of the brain. And of course, as we all know, it's possible as adults or older children to learn languages after the critical period, but it actually takes a lot more work. It's not so effortless like it is with kids. And in fact, we have to really pay attention and work at it in order to learn that second language. So this was an immense amount of insight that brain imaging was providing in helping us to understand the process of learning. And technical developments and advancements in technological advancements in recent years have really provided a lot more brain imaging options, offering us increasingly higher resolutions and ability to see these brain images at faster speeds and at better resolution, so we're able to better understand the structure, wiring and function of the brain. EEG measurements are among the most promising neurotechnology solutions because of their non-invasive nature, their potential for low cost and relative ease of use. And just for those of you who may not already be familiar with EEG, your brain is made up of billions of neurons. When the neurons interact, the chemical reaction that takes place emits an electrical impulse. So EEG, or electroencephalography, is the process of observing brain waves, essentially changes in electrical fluctuations that can be measured at the surface of the scalp, which result from the neurons firing. Well, I thought, wouldn't it be incredible if we could make it possible for every child, give them a chance to scan their brain so that we could tailor education and systems and programs to really strengthen essential areas of learning while the brain is most plastic, when it's most sensitive and most flexible and able to learn. Well, when we first embarked on this area of research 7 years ago, what it became very obvious to me as the founder of Emotiv is that it's actually very difficult, because machines available at the time to study, observe and image the brain were very cumbersome to use, time-consuming and also very cost-prohibitive. EEG measurements typically would involve a hairnet with an array of sensors like the ones that you see in the image behind me. A technician, and the process for actually using this device would go as follows. A technician will place the electrodes onto the head using a conductive gel or paste, and generally only after a procedure of preparing the scalp by light abrasion. So basically what they do is they scrape the skin to remove the dead skin cells and then place the sensors onto the scalp, and hopefully after 1 hour you can start to get a good clean reading. And so as you can imagine, it's not the most comfortable process, and on top of that these systems are really expensive. They cost in the tens of thousands of dollars. The other challenge, of course, is in actually building algorithms that can actually decipher the complex electrical fluctuations that you can measure non-invasively at the surface of the scalp. Our brain may just weigh 3 pounds, but it's one of the most advanced organs in our bodies. As I said before, it contains an estimated 100 billion nerve cells called neurons and many, many more support cells. And in fact, one of the most challenging issues for conducting brain research, or at least non-invasive brain research, is this structure that you can see here behind me. This folded structure, the cortex, which we associate with the human brain, is individualized across the population. So even though the signal may come from the same functional part of the brain, by the time it goes through the cortex and gets projected onto the surface of the scalp, it actually looks very different across the population. Even between identical twins, it doesn't look the same. And so that is a fundamental barrier in any form of EEG research up until now. And what we were able to do at Emotiv was to basically bring together a multidisciplinary team that tackled this very problem. and we were able to bring to market a rather innovative EEG device. So I'm going to take a moment and ask for a volunteer, hopefully someone who is ready and willing to try their moving stuff with their minds. Anyone? Okay, there's a few people. Maybe you here? Yes? Come up on stage. You speak a little bit of English? Okay, that's perfect. So the stage, you can walk up this way, because this is really high. So the device you see here is a high fidelity, high resolution, multi-channel EEG acquisition system. So please take a seat. It doesn't require any expert knowledge from the user, so it's quite easy to use. It's got 16 channels. It's wireless, so it gives you the freedom to move around. And compared to conventional systems, it's like 100 times cheaper than conventional EEG systems. Could you flick over to this machine for me, please? Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to turn this on. And what's your name, please?
Ivan.
Ivan? Okay, great. So if you can please just type in your name, add a new user. Okay, that's great. Now I'm going to just put this on you. So the way it works is very simple. You put the device on your head, and you can see there a bunch of dots on the screen which represent each of the sensors on Ivan's head. And what we're doing here is we're trying to establish a good connection between his brain and the sensors. So we're trying to establish a good conductive path between all of the sensors. And that's pretty good. So as you can see, it's real time, so you can see the colors kind of change as I touch them. No, it's okay. It just, it's all right. Should be okay. And I'll just do this. Just wriggle it into your head so that it gets through the hair. So you can see it can work through the hair without any issues. The only thing is you want to make sure that the signals kind of, give it a little bit of time for the signals to settle. But now, after a few minutes of putting it on his head, we start to see that the signals go green, and you don't need every sensor to go green in order to make the system work. So it's pretty robust in that respect. So now what you see here is a live trace from Ivan's head. And so as you can see, instead of spending an hour in the hospital with a crazy machine that makes you strapped to the system, here, after a few minutes, you can see immediately the electrical signals that's coming out of Ivan's head. And as he's smiling, you can see a huge amount of activity. And this is basically noise. So it's an artifact, a muscle artifact. So muscles also generate electrical signals, and it gets superimposed onto the tiny EEG, which is the brain signal. So now that he's not laughing anymore, you can see more clearly the brain signals coming through again. So that's his brain. So now we'll switch over and see a few more images of what's going on in here. So each of these quadrants represent the frequency activity in Ivan's brain, and it's divided into 4 quadrants. Delta, which is from 1 to 4 hertz, doesn't really pick up at all while you're awake. So it will stay the same way. If he starts to get drowsy, so say for example he's driving a car and he's getting really tired and he's falling asleep, that's when you'll start to see the delta activity pick up. Similarly, if he was sleeping, you'll also see quite active delta activity. But while he's awake and alert, you won't really see any activity there. On the other hand, you're seeing a lot of theta activity in the frontal cortex and nothing much in the beta activity. So he's not doing any crazy mathematical sums in his head right now. And you know, if he was to do some really hard math sums, you'll start to see different activations in different parts of the brain in different frequency ranges, which helps you to get a sense of what's going on in his mind. And this map will always change. It's constantly changing depending on what's going on in Ivan's head. So here is another example of what's going on, but this is actually in three-dimensional format. So you can actually isolate and have a look at the specific region that you might be interested in. So for example, if you were interested in looking at the occipital lobe activity, which is basically the back of the brain where we process visual images, then you know, we could, if he starts to try and imagine, say, a beautiful beach or imagine something really cool, hopefully if he has a really good strong sense of visualization and not just recalling. If he's recalling a lot of activity, he'll use a lot of his frontal lobe, and so as he's doing now. But if he starts to imagine and visualize it, you'll start to see more activity in the back of his head. So that really starts to give you a sense of what is going on in Ivan's mind, and if he's actually following instructions, which is pretty good, you are. So that's a good precursor for us to try something else. So what can you do by being able to measure and image the brain in this way? So we don't have a huge amount of time, so I wanted to show you just some really simple examples of what you can do. So what we've done is we've created a number of detection suites that measure and pick up your emotional state, for example, your facial expressions and your cognitive intent. So the idea was to try and mirror more closely the way that humans interact with each other, because up until now our communication with machines has been very one-dimensional. You give a machine a command and then it does that task for you. But when we communicate as humans, it's actually a lot more interactive and a lot more complex and interesting, because we take into account a lot more than what is explicitly expressed. We observe, facial expressions, which is a big part of our communication with each other. We observe body language, and we can also kind of intuit feelings and emotions just by, looking at one another. So this is something that doesn't exist between our communications with machines today. And so the idea was to try and use this equipment, pick up these signals, analyze them, and help machines to understand humans better so that it can dynamically change and respond to you as a human being and tailor the experience to you. So we won't show you all of the suites, but we'll show you one suite, which is the cognitive suite. Now this one is the ability for you to move an object just with your mind. So you might want to see what you're doing there. So the way that this works is, unlike the other detection suites where it's designed to work out of the box, this particular one, you actually have to show the system how you think about the action. So we'll start first by taking a neutral or baseline state. So this is pretty straightforward. He doesn't have to do anything in particular. He's just hanging out, being himself, and we're just taking a neutral, normal state of his brain. So once we've done that, I'm going to ask you to pick an action that you think you can visualize very clearly in your mind. Like push, pull, like some sort of something like movement based. So say left, right, push, pull, or rotation. Push, okay, push, okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to show the system. So what you need to do now is you want to imagine the cube slowly moving into the distance. The first time nothing will happen because the system has no idea how you think about push. You'll see a progress bar scroll across. You'd want to continuously think push the whole time, okay? So it's not push and stop, it's like one long push. So ready, set, go. Okay, so now that you've done push, the system kind of has an idea, so you can try to imagine. Very good, good job. Very good Jedi mind skills, huh? Okay, So that was very good. So maybe we can try a harder action. What do you think? Let's try something harder. Okay. So shall we try maybe a rotation? Oh, let's try disappear. This is really hard, but maybe you can do it. So the idea is there's a lot of movement-based actions, and generally there's a lot of analogies for that in the physical world because we move things all the time. So that's kind of easier, right? But with disappear, it's just an idea in your mind. So you have to just imagine the cube slowly fading away. The first time nothing will happen because it looked like it was so easy for you. So I'm going to try this one, which is a lot harder, and see if you can do it. So first time again, nothing will happen, okay? So 1, 2, 3. Okay. Looks like you're very good. So try that again. It's hard, huh? Okay, a little hard. So should we give it one more example? So the idea is, this is a machine learning algorithm embedded into the system. So the idea is, as you give it more examples, it will learn how you think about the action and it will improve with time. Obviously, you are a very complex learning machine yourself, so you will also adapt and adjust and become better with training. So let's show it one more time because disappear is actually very hard. So try again. This time, if the system detects that you are making the cube disappear, it will disappear. So don't be phased. Keep thinking disappear, okay? Okay, one, ready, set, go. Okay, so you could make it disappear for sure. Let's see. Yeah. Very good job. Okay, well, Ivan, thank you very much for being my volunteer. That's much appreciated. Wasn't he great? And we are also showcasing the technology at Campus Futuro in the expo area. So please, if you would like to try yourself, come to the space and there will be an opportunity for you to try the technology there. So if we could please switch back to the Mac, please. Awesome. So what can we do with this technology now that you've seen that maybe we can move a couple of things with your mind? So I would like to take some time and show you some examples. Here I know there's a lot of gamers, so I'll start first with an example of use in games. Yes? Kind of froze. The next one. That's it. Is there sound?
Sonido. Yeah. Lo tengo al máximo.
No? While they're fussing with that, do you have any questions before we run to some examples? Any urging questions that you have to ask now that Ivan's been able to move a cube just with his thoughts? Yes? Oh, that's a really good question. So the question was, if you drove a car and you were sad or angry, what would happen? Well, we would understand, the system would understand that you were angry or frustrated, and it could actually take over. So with autonomous driving, the idea is you can rely on artificial intelligence to help compensate for your poor, bad decision making. So if you were really angry and you were going through a bit of road rage, it can say, hey, that's not good. Or if you were tired and drowsy, like the case that I mentioned before, if we detected delta activity, you know, it would say, you shouldn't be driving. Please have a rest and let's get the show on the road another way. So okay, we've got the video. This is an example of the use of technology in gaming.
It took 200 years for the Library of Congress with all of its information. Today we create that amount of information every 15 minutes.
The future is going to be fun. If it's not, why bother going?
The intelligent future will have many new ways to play.
Smarter technology will blur the line between what is real and what is not. New immersive games require new ways to play them. Future gamers won't need a joystick or a paddle. They'll interact with their games directly from their brains, using devices like the Epic headset from Emotiv.
Our whole interaction with the virtual world is going to be far more natural. We'll be able to use our brain and our facial expressions and our emotional experiences to really experience content in entirely new ways. What we've created is a brain-computer interface that really transforms the way that humans interact with machines.
The Emotiv Epic wireless headset has 16 independent sensors that pick up electrical brain signals on the surface of the scalp.
We identify a signature for a particular thought or a particular emotion, and then in real time we classify those brain patterns.
So when you think it, it happens on the screen.
You think push, the object propels forward.
So now my master's showing me how to pull using that tree. Then he'll ask me to focus all my thoughts on pulling that tree towards me.
There are 13 individual detections: push, pull, lift, drop, left, right, and then rotation in 6 different axes in a 3D environment.
You can even visualize an object disappearing, and it will. But the headset is more than just a brain-powered joystick. It allows the game to detect whether or not you're actually having fun.
It observes your experiences: excitement versus calmness, emotion, tension, frustration, engagement.
There are these mischievous spirit wisps that instead of pressing a button, I can scare away just by looking fierce. So, and you can notice by the sky color that I enjoy that part.
So when it comes to future game playing, keep an open mind.
We're really only at the tip of the iceberg in terms of what's possible.
So will all this innovation in virtual reality gaming spell the end of a good old-fashioned night out at the movies?
So that's one example of the application in the future of games, but it can also be applied in some business contexts as well. So for market research and advertising, for example, it's all about trying to understand whether a product package, a retail package, a product, a design actually had the desired effect on the user. So in this example, you can see the orange dots represent where the eyes are looking, and you can see the brain's response in relation to what is seen on the screen. So you can actually tell if the person is engaged, if they're interested, what they're looking at, and determine whether or not it had the desired effect on the person. If it's working or not. Is your advertisement effective?
I've never seen anything like this before.
Great enthusiasm, terrible timing.
Isn't that the chick that was backstage yesterday?
I want to be up there. I want to do that.
Question is, do you have the talent? Because you're on.
So we've also seen the application in some real physical objects as well. So for example, in a smart home or a smart office, you can also use this as a control system. So here it's used to control the actual control mechanism and the control system, and then it's used to direct the closure of the curtains or opening the curtains if you prefer. And obviously it can be connected to music, lighting in the environment. And so quite a lot of companies now around the world, especially in Europe, are specifically interested in this. So you can see he can turn on the light or turn it off. And these are some really early examples of some implementations in a smart home environment. But you can start to see where the future might go with this sort of technology. And we're particularly excited about the application to some really life-changing applications, such as in this case, the application is to control an electric wheelchair just by using facial expressions. Obviously, you can use the cognitive commands as well. So he's basically using his eyes because he still has control of his eyes, and this is an example of an implementation done by the team at Intel. And he's using the smile command to basically move the wheelchair forward. So this is a really simple implementation, but it can equally be applied using the cognitive controls. And I just wanted to show you one final example of being able to drive a vehicle with your thoughts. And this is very futuristic. It's not something that we want to do today, but at least it gives you a sense of where some companies see the potential for this technology in the near future.
In our first experiment, the test subject uses the sensor cap to give commands to our autonomous car. The car is equipped with video cameras, radars, and laser sensors that provide the car with a full three-dimensional view of its surroundings. The car drives automatically to the corner. At the intersection, the test subject orders the car to take a right. The car continues automatically. The small frame on the upper right shows the laser sensor readings. The frame in the lower right shows the brain command for the car. After a small delay, the car turns around the corner, as you can see. For a second experiment, we trained the computer to recognize 4 brain patterns. The test subject can steer the car to the left or the right. He can also accelerate or decelerate the car. Of course, you should never try this at home. For safety reasons, we tested in a large open space at Tempelhof Airport in Berlin. You can see here the test subject incrementing or decrementing the steering angle. There's a slight delay between the brain command and the steering action. Remember, this is just a proof of concept. The task here was to show free driving by detecting brain patterns.
So where do I see the technology going from here? So for me personally, the next chapter is in the life sciences space, with a special focus and emphasis on mental and neurological conditions, where there's really been a growing understanding and awareness in with global health organizations about the increasing cost, economic cost and personal burden for these disorders and these conditions. So my belief is that solutions will depend on innovative new technologies that, like the Emotiv Epoch system, that will allow us to scan and get functional brain data in a very cost-effective manner. So, one of the things that we're working on now, and we'd like to invite others to participate, is, up until now, it was very expensive to participate in brain research. It was, left to a very small subset of our community. The people who could access the $5 million equipment, the $250,000 pieces of equipment, or $70,000 pieces of equipment. So the kinds of people who could have access to the possibility of doing brain research was very, very limited. But the brain has so much information about who we are and what we could become, right? And the functions in our brain and our mental condition. And so our philosophy when I started Emotiv was to try and encourage as many people as possible to participate in brain research, to enable them to have a chance to find a way to further our evolution as humans. And today, by making this equipment available to people around the world for a fraction of the cost of what it would have been if you wanted to study brain research in the past. We open up a whole new horizon in terms of what's possible. So you can get, for less than for several hundred dollars, you can now participate in brain research. And one of the things that we believe is that with cloud computing, with data mining and algorithms and pattern recognition algorithms that we can build on top of our platform, with the community that we have today and the growing community that we can ask and invite to join us and participate in this process, we can start to really build some biomarkers and a much better understanding of the brain than was ever possible before. Because just with the community that exists today, if everybody just spent 1 hour or 2 hours collecting brainwave data, we would have a database that far exceeds anything that exists up until this point in time. So I think this really opens up the potential for a huge amount of exponential growth in our understanding of the human brain. And I really would like to invite you as developers, as researchers, as people interested in technology to take part and help us shape where this technology can go from here, because we really are only just at the tip of the iceberg in terms of where we're at today and what's going to be possible in the future. So I hope you can join us in this process. So thank you, and I'd like to spend some time now to take questions, because I'm sure you probably have quite a few questions. Thank you. I think there was one at the back there.
One off the internet, just for the people streaming, and then we'll go into the audience. The first question I have is, are the sensors sensitive enough for medical applications?
The sensors are sensitive enough for medical applications. We sample at 2,000 samples per second, so it's the same as any medical grade EEG device that you would buy on the market today. So, and then we downsample to 128 hertz to filter out all of the noise, so you can actually get much cleaner signals than you would. So it's a filtered system with better filters and amplifiers, so that you could get a much cleaner EEG system, a signal straight out of the bat, just with your visual eyes. Okay. Question at the back, yes.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Osvaldo. I have a question. In the future, we can access to the code, to the source code. We have access to the source code in the future.
So right now the source code is not available, but what is available is the application environment, the APIs, so you can basically connect to any of the existing detections that have been developed. But at the same time, the raw data, the raw EEG data is also open, so that you can also build your own algorithms. Say, for example, you're interested in autism research or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. You can take the raw EEG data because it embodies a huge amount of information about the brain, and you can build your own specific algorithms around those detections. And that is completely open to you to do, and there is a very large growing community of people who is already doing that and sharing and exchanging information about that. So, maybe one day we will start to open up the source code, but right now it's not open.
Okay, we've got another question in the back.
Okay.
It's hard to see.
Oh, there you are.
Bueno, yo la voy a hacer en español porque para mí es importante como conocer la respuesta y me van a hacer el favor de traducirla. Entonces yo quisiera saber en el enamoramiento, ¿en qué parte del cerebro hay mayor actividad? ¿Qué pasa cuando nos enamoramos o cuando vemos a alguien que nos resulta atractivo?
Okay, so Mayra was asking with regards to falling in love, what part of the brain is most active when you fall in love with someone?
Okay, so that's a complicated question because I have not done any personal research on love, although I'm very interested myself. But what I do know is that from other people's studies on love, for example, there are neurotransmitters that get that gets secreted as a result of that. So there's a dopamine release which makes you feel good, and as a result of that, everything else around you, it's like, that's why there's an expression, you know, you have those rose colored glasses when you're in love, because everything around you feels great. That's because there's a dopamine or a release of neurotransmitters, which are basically reward signals in your brain to kind of like consolidate those experiences. Yes, but we really haven't done any specific research on love, unfortunately. I'd like to do that though. Okay, next question.
Hi, my name's Larissa. First of all, congratulations. It's just amazing what you do.
Thank you.
And I would like to know which has been your biggest challenge while developing Motive.
Thank you, that's a good question. So as an entrepreneur, this is the kind of thing that is very, very difficult to really get anyone behind, right? Because can you imagine going in and knocking on the door of an investor and saying, hey, I have a great idea. I'd like to create a device that can read your mind. I mean, it's pretty crazy. It's like a science fiction project. So there are obviously some really big hurdles from the standpoint of financing for the project, as well as, which we overcame, as well as some really technical challenges. So the first major technical challenge was the algorithms themselves, trying to build an algorithm to decipher the complex electrical fluctuations that we can measure. And then the second challenge, which was less challenging in some respects, was to create the device. So trying to build a device that can retail for several $100s is very, very challenging when they exist right now in the tens of thousands of dollars. So at $50,000 it's quite different, but when you're trying to make a device that you can sell for, you know, $500, it's a very different situation. So that was a huge amount of electronics design, a huge amount of redesigning, re-engineering from the ground up. Because nothing existed when we first started this. So that was certainly a very, very big challenge. And the third, the other challenge I would say is a market challenge. Going out there and telling people that this exists and inviting them to participate as well, because, you know, we can't usher in a revolution around an understanding of the human brain by ourselves. That's just not possible. But with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of researchers and developers around the world participating in that process, yes, we can make a very big impact on understanding the brain. So I think that's the next challenge. Okay, next.
Another question from Twitter is, could this device be used by people missing a body part to control their prosthetic?
Yes, that's certainly possible. We've actually seen quite a number of groups already working on that. In two respects. So the first is in terms of maintaining the neural pathways around the motor control. So as you know, if you don't use certain parts of your brain, it will start to diminish. It will start to deplete. And so it becomes harder to rehabilitate somebody if they, for example, if they've lost a limb and they haven't been able to use anything for a very long time. There's no way to exercise that idea of moving your arm. So by the time you get the prosthetic limb, it's a longer rehabilitation process. But now with virtual arms, you can continue to exercise the idea of moving your arm and continue to maintain those neural pathways. So that's one way in which it's used. And the second way is in actual implementation of the control of the prosthetic limb. And so we're seeing both integrations by companies and organizations around the world.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, you say that we could participate in two ways, like developer and researcher.
Yes.
So I would just wanted to know if I were gonna develop something or research something, what will I be able to do researching or developing software or something like that? What can I do?
Right. So as a developer or researcher, there is a number of things that you can do. So we have there is a similar model to the App Store, iPhone App Store sort of model. So if you develop an application, you own the IP to the application, you submit it to the store, it gets approved, You make 70% of the gross proceeds if you want to sell it, and the company retains 30% of the gross proceeds. That's one avenue. The other avenue is if you just want to do the research and you want to put it out there, that's also perfectly fine, because the idea is to encourage the research and development, and any sort of derivative IP, so any IP that is not created by the company belongs to you. So there's no questions about that. It's very clear that up until the point of the technology that was developed by the company, it belongs to the company, but anything that is derivative, anything that you create yourself, is up to you to exploit, and you can file patents and you can protect that IP and you can exploit it, because we really believe in intellectual property. There's a lot of IP out there, there's a lot of new territory, new ground to be explored, so we want to encourage that exploration.
Yep. Okay. Here, on your right. Okay.
Yes. Hi.
I have a question. Do you have them for sale here? Because I don't know if you have a discount. I'm really interested in getting one, because I was watching the web page, and there's a software development kit. It comes with a USB dongle. I mean, it's really useful. So I don't know if you had a promotion for getting one or something.
Okay, so the systems are available online at the website, as you already found out. Unfortunately, we don't have any promotions now, but I will talk to the campus party team and the internal group to see if maybe something can be arranged, because I think that's a great idea.
I'm going to take another question from Twitter,
sure.
Because someone from the audience already asked me the same thing, so it seems to be a prevalent question, which is, right now, up until now, we've talked about reading brainwaves. Can you apply that to induce thought as well? Is this research going in that direction?
So the research so far has not been in terms of inducing thoughts. However, I have seen patents filed by other companies, in other fields, that are looking at stimulating parts of the brain that will invoke certain experiences. And I have seen that come through in the literature. So yes, it's going to be foreseeable that could happen in the future, but that's certainly not the space that Emotiv is in. The space that Emotiv is in is purely in measurement and observation of what's coming out of the brain and trying to understand and make sense of that.
Hola, buenas noches.
Hola.
Mi nombre es Daniel. He visto que han hecho experimentos con Emotiv para poder manipular vehículos, pero mi pregunta es en el sentido de que si han hecho experimentos con esqueletos mecánicos, esto con el fin de que, por ejemplo, personas discapacitadas se puedan mover, y bueno, ¿cuál sería el problema de no hacerlo?
Okay, so Daniel says that he's seen that you've used this to do prototype technology to control vehicles.
Yep.
Have you tried it with mechanical skeletons with the idea of helping people gain mobility?
That's a really great question. A lot of these videos that you saw were not developed by Emotiv, the company. It was developed by third-party developers like you guys. So it's either a PhD student, a master's student, maybe it's a company, maybe it's you work in a big company and you say, hey, I saw this and I want to do this, and your company supports you to do it. So a lot of those systems were not developed by Emotiv. Personally, I haven't seen any integrations with exoskeletons, so that may come in the future. If that's your area of interest, please do participate. But I certainly haven't seen that so far.
Hi.
Hi.
Over here. I think it's amazing that you can help disabled people to make them move their limbs, etc. I was a little bit concerned when I saw the video gaming and stuff, because it's been a history of health issues regarding, for instance, epileptic attacks and epilepsy. So I'm wondering have you considered any effects to the health?
So with epileptic seizures, it's actually really good, because if you can actually monitor what's going on in the brain. So an epileptic seizure is like a storm that brews in the brain. So instead of, so right now when you're looking at storms that happen in our environment, we monitor the conditions of the environment all the time, and so you can predict with really good accuracy when the storm is going to hit. The problem with the brain, like with an epileptic seizure for example, is that there's no observation. You might have been diagnosed with epilepsy, but you're walking around all day long, you might have medication, but there's no way to predict when, because you're not observing the brain. So in fact, it can be very good as a tool for remote monitoring of patients who have been diagnosed with epilepsy, because it's a very cheap way in which people can continually get feedback, and very intelligent systems can be built around predicting when a seizure could occur in the future. And this is some of the work that we are seeing developed by a number of different companies, mainly research institutes in the United States. And yeah, well, I mean, gaming is one example, but I think that there's good and bad on both. It's like it could be fun, but at the same time, if you're spending 12 hours playing and you're going to get really lethargic and don't do anything else, I mean, there's going to be some detrimental effects. One good thing I will say, though, about the use of this device is the fact that it's so new that it really requires you to put in some very intense focus and concentration. And as adults, one of the key ingredients in maintaining plasticity in the brain is to undertake learning activities that requires this sort of really intense focus and attention. So say learning a new language, learning how to dance if you've never danced before, those activities, or trying to control stuff with your mind because you've never done it before, it requires an incredible amount of focus and attention, which is really good in trying to secrete those neurotransmitters which are crucial to preserving the plasticity in the brain. So it's and keeping the cognitive decline at bay. So it's actually a really, it could have some really good beneficial effects as well. Yep.
Good afternoon, and here, behind you.
Oh, hi.
Hello, good afternoon. Well, I consider this as a real breakthrough, I mean, in the term of neuroscience. But I have something to consider. I mean, you interfere in people's minds. I mean, people's intimacy, it's incredible. But have you ever run into ethics limits? What are the limits? Are there some, let's say, legal frameworks that may...
Yeah, I think obviously that's a really good question, because right now you're taking readings from someone's brain, and before that we've never had that access, right? But one of the saving graces right now is the fact that they're in your own CPU. We don't store the data anywhere right now. And so if you wanted to store the data for the purpose of research, that's your prerogative. It's something that you can say, I would like to provide the data for the purposes of evolving the research in this space, and therefore I will contribute my information. However, if you do not, it stays on your CPU, you can eliminate it, you can do what you like with it. So there's not so much privacy issues at this point in time. I can imagine there could be in the future once it becomes much more distributed. Yep. Yes. Where's the microphone? Okay.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
Question, obviously. For example, when you are driving and you want to turn to the left or to the right, for example, other thoughts like thinking about a problem or something, will it affect the results of this software, or does it really focus on our desires, like, come on, go to the left, come on, what's
The system as it exists today requires you to think very specifically about that very thought. So Ivan, who tried the system before in the demo, he would have had to think very specifically about that idea. If he was having fleeting thoughts about, oh, what did I eat for lunch, what am I going to do tonight, it wouldn't move. It requires you to think very specifically about the action. Obviously, in the future, when we have better granularity of the reactions, we might be able to differentiate between a lot more thoughts, like that sort of thing that you're talking about. But right now, the system can detect up to 4 distinct actions in the one setting, and like with that, just the mental thought, because there's a limit to how much you can do as a person. I mean, in the lab, I remember that there was the maximum that was possible with even the top person in the company was 9 actions. So 9 different ideas in the same setting and being able to make those move reliably at the same time. But we haven't released that to the general public because it's just very difficult to consistently and robustly achieve that.
We've got a over here
time. I'm just, yep. Yeah, hi. Okay.
Sí, hola, mi nombre es Jonathan. Yo estudio una maestría en BCI, Brain Computer Interface. So my English is very bad. So,
okay. I have no
mi
Spanish.
pregunta en sí es, la diadema o el dispositivo se usa directamente sobre el cráneo, no se necesita el uso de gel, ya no o sea, porque normalmente el cabello hace que la señal se pierda casi por completo. Entonces, por ejemplo, nosotros lo que hacemos es, de hecho, donde se va a poner el electrodo, tallamos y ponemos gel conductiva para que se pueda obtener la señal del EEG. Entonces mi pregunta es, ¿qué tan directo es ya el uso de este dispositivo? ¿Simplemente te lo pones y empieza a registrar o si se necesita un proceso largo como de adecuación para usarlo?
Jonathan's studying brain-computer interface, a degree in that, and he says that when he's doing the research, generally what they have to do is they actually have to scrub the scalp and then apply gel. And from the looks of it, this doesn't seem to be the case. He's asking, well, how long and how much preparation is needed?
So it's not very much preparation at all. Right now, the sensors that are here are saline based, so you basically have the sensors in a pack and they stay moist, and you basically clip them in or click them into position, and you put it on your head, and it takes, as you saw, about a few minutes for the signals to settle. If you have a lot of hair, it will take longer, so it could take 5 minutes if you're not very experienced. For me, even with a lot of hair, probably 3 minutes to get it to work very well. But with people who have pretty short hair, or my hair, no problem, like less than a minute, you have clean signals. It's very quick, very, very efficient. Yep.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Victor.
Yeah, so I'm going to translate bit by bit as he goes forward. He says that he's personally tried the system and he says that and he's tried the system himself and he's found that yes, you're right. It requires a lot of concentration.
That's right.
To make the interface work.
That's right.
Mi pregunta es si ya lo usaron o están pensando desarrollarlo para, por ejemplo, niños que tienen problemas de concentración y aplicaciones en ese sentido.
He's asking if you've tried or you're considering of applying this technology towards children who have problems with attention deficit.
Yes, it's already been used in ADHD research and in tailoring system software for learning in that context. And yes, it requires a lot of concentration as a novice user, but as you get better, as you spend more time with the system, the best way to do it is just to eliminate your old profile and start from scratch, because you've advanced so much yourself, and build a new profile, and you'll find that it's much, much easier. So it's definitely a skill, but you improve very, very quickly over time as well. Yeah, interesting. Yes?
Yeah. During your research, have you ever find any anomaly or a person who thinks different to the standard when you are getting the database? I mean, I think there is a standard.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever find anybody who thinks really different to the others, or the brain waves are?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So yes, there are outliers for sure. There's certainly a normal band of a lot of common similar features, and so the way that the algorithms are built is based on a very large statistical sample of a very large population sample. So lots and lots of examples of how you push, how you pull, how you think left, right, and then when you show the system how you think about the action, the algorithms basically refine themselves to you. And so that's why it's much faster. So you can see that it only takes a few seconds rather than you having to start from scratch and taking months to train a BCI system, which is very common. This system is much faster because we're leveraging the large database of information that already exists from the research that we took. And yes, there are outliers, of course, with anything, right? Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question. This is very visual, but what about blind people? What's the benefit for them?
That's a really interesting question. In fact, we never did any research on blind people. However, in Colombia, when I was at Campus Party in Colombia just a few weeks ago, there was a young man who was not blind at birth, but he developed the condition during his childhood years. And basically, he was still able to imagine in his mind and able to move the object very, very effectively without seeing anything. So basically we took a baseline state, we then we asked him to show the machine how he thought about an action, and then whenever he wanted to control it, he just thought it and it worked. And it was pretty amazing. His mother was just so proud of him because his brain is perfectly fine. It's just that the vision is no longer intact, yeah. We're going to have to wrap up soon, so yes, a couple more questions.
Hello, I'm Fernando Fontova, I come from CIMAD. I have a couple of doubts. First, is there a preset training on the classification? Because it kind of looks like you can trick it by, if you have to think push, you think, I don't know, red, and you think very strong in red, and is it possible to trick it, or is there a preset training?
Yes, so with any machine learning training system, you can definitely overtrain and change the system. So there's some preset parameters, and in fact we encourage the development community to try and attach different things to it. And with that, the disappear is the most flexible of all the detections. So we've seen, for example, people using it for mobile phone where they think call, for example, for lift. Instead of lift, they think call and it will work. So certainly the system is there to help you learn faster, but it's also flexible enough so that you can adapt it to whatever it is that you're trying to do.
And second, you said that the EEG database is available for anyone, so where can I access it?
So the EEG database is not available for everyone. The idea is that what we're trying to do is, well, at least what I'm trying to do personally now, is to focus on the life sciences space, which is to try and build a large database of information about neurological conditions. And this is only something that I'm starting now, so it's very new. I've spent 7 years focusing on creating the technology platform to enable this next stage of research. But my personal belief is that there are so many mental and neurological conditions that I can't wait for other people to do it. I want to focus my time and my energy towards that. So I'm going to be spearheading that effort to try and build that. And I'd love to, if there's anybody who's interested in that space, get a hold of me.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
My name is Jaime.
Yep.
And we watched the brain activity of the guy that it was in front of you.
Yes.
So my question is there any way to recreate this brain activity, but in an artificial way? I mean, to make him think that is like pushing the cube in this case?
I'm not quite understanding.
Yeah, we watched the brain activity when he was thinking that he was moving the cube, right?
Yes.
So is there any way to create this brain activity, this activity on his brain, but in an artificial way? I mean, sending like electro waves, or I don't know.
So sending waves where?
Like, I don't know, like sending electromagnetic waves, or I don't know, a way to introduce him like this kind of brain activity.
To make him do that? No. So there's no sending in. There's no mechanism. Like certainly there's systems like transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is basically applying a very large magnetic pulse towards a region of the brain to shut down parts of the brain. And I've certainly seen systems like that. And you can certainly stimulate certain behavior as a result of that. It's not very precise at this time, but I could certainly imagine a time when it can become more localized for you to be able to induce certain things. But this system is not designed to do that.
Ok, tenemos tiempo para 2 preguntas más.
Hello, I'm Tere. I just want to know, what did you study?
Oh my God, this is an interesting question. I am an ex-lawyer. So I was a lawyer first. I then became an entrepreneur. I started a company doing software for telecommunications carriers. And when I sold that business, I moved into brain research, and I've been doing work in the brain for 7 years now. Any more questions? One more? Okay.
Thank you. Is there any chance that after you learn to use this device, you can use it and do some other things like, I don't know, washing the dishes, if it's a handicapped person or something, that after you learn this like new language, I don't know, you can, there is no mixed information there, like noise or something?
I think right now the controls are quite limited. So the kinds of things that you can do would be to control a main system and allow it, use that to control multiple functions, and then so it's like a data, like a flowchart sort of system, right? So you select at a higher level certain things and zone in into that sort of tree structure. In the future, I think there is certainly the potential to create systems that will allow you to do a lot more processing. But that's why I say we require much larger databases of information before we can really do that effectively, yeah. Looks like the party is starting already. All right, well, thank you very much. Thank you for coming, and yeah, I'll be around.
Tan, in name of Campus Party, I thank you very much for coming here and talking with us.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Les recuerdo 2 cosas. Uno, los que tienen auriculares, que no se olviden devolverlo, si no es un rollo.